back. Gonna be back. So here's the bottom line is I know that it's only Monday. I know that some of you are still reacting to a busy week 4 in college football this past Saturday, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Shedeur Sanders, USC, Michigan, whatever. But I also don't think that it's ever too early to look ahead to the next weekend, especially when we got a pretty big one in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Yeah, you all know what I'm talking about. Top 5 matchup in Tuscaloosa, Alabama hosting Georgia. And listen, just from the off-the-field narratives, there's plenty to discuss. Alabama is the reigning SEC champs. Alabama did beat Georgia to keep them out of the playoff last year. So does Alabama still wear the crown in the SEC now under Kalen DeBoer? Is Georgia coming to take back what they believe is rightfully theirs? This game is going to be so awesome. I cannot wait. I could not wait until Tuesday or Wednesday to start talking about this game. So let's go ahead and just do kind of a first initial early reaction to this game. And in my opinion, what today is about, this isn't about saying my official pick is blah, 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 blah. No. That's not what this is about. Neither coach has spoken yet this week. We'll get the injury report later in this week. What I do want to do, though, is just talk about the game, the matchup, and what I believe 2 or 3 X factors could be in this game. So let's go ahead and start. We'll start with Alabama. Alabama, to me, I think this is about as well as you could have hoped for the Kalen DeBoer era to start. 3 lopsided victories to open. Now, I know that South Florida game was close into the fourth quarter, but we also discussed it at the time. Major injuries along the offensive line. Caden Proctor didn't play. Elijah Pritchett did not start. Tyler Booker, an All-American guard, had to move over to tackle for the first time in his career. So it was less than an ideal situation for Alabama, but they win that game. Then the O-line is good to go against Wisconsin, and we saw just how good and dominant this team can be. 42-10, the final score in the game at Wisconsin that bluntly just was not even close, not even a little bit. Now, in terms of this game and these teams, and specifically Alabama, what's interesting to me is that it feels like we spent all offseason kind of talking about that Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe relationship, right? What can Jalen Milroe be under Kalen DeBoer? We saw Michael Penix turn into a Heisman Trophy candidate and a first-round top 10 NFL draft pick when he got back under Kalen DeBoer's tutelage after transferring from Indiana to Washington, okay? But at the same time, what's interesting to me, what I have seen early in this Alabama reign for Kalen DeBoer is exactly what we talked about all offseason on this YouTube channel, is that Kalen DeBoer, I don't believe his gift is developing quarterbacks or passing games. What he does as well as anybody in college football on the offensive side, I believe he does as good of a job putting together a game plan that is going to match up with that specific opponent as well as anybody in the sport. We talked about it last year during the college football playoff. You beat Oregon in that Pac-12 championship game. You're playing Texas in the playoff. Oh my goodness, how are you going to? Texas is too big and too physical up front. So what does Kalen DeBoer do? A couple quick passes, gets Texas on their heels, couple deep passes, boom, boom, boom. Washington ends up beating Texas to play for a national championship. And so when I look at DeBoer and I look at this matchup, we spent so much time focusing on Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe has been really good, by the way, in large part to Ryan Williams, who's been unbelievable. But what stands out to me about this Alabama team through 3 games is the run game has just been absolutely off the charts. Jam Miller averaging over 9 yards per carry with 3 touchdowns. Justice Haynes over 8.5 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. Obviously, Milroe is making plays with his legs as well. But it's the run game. It's between the tackles. But what's also interesting is, it's not just between the tackles, but you know what I'm saying. But what's also interesting, this is the other part that's interesting to me, is the fact that you are going up against a Georgia defense, which has been good, but I don't necessarily think elite against the run game early. Now, I know it's early. You don't want to overreact to too much. But first off, remember, Kirby Smart did say in the offseason, he talked a lot about this. He said, we just don't have the depth and bodies along the defensive front that we had 2, 3, 4 years ago. Is it the portal? Nobody has as much depth. But this is something that he talked about, and it's been worth noting. Teams have been able to run the ball on Georgia this year. Kentucky rushed for 170 yards against the Bulldogs, 4 yards per carry. Now, I know Kentucky's entire game plan was basically to just run, chew up the clock, try to win the most low-scoring game that you could. Doesn't change the fact 4 yards per carry, 170 yards on the ground. That, to me, matters, especially coming into this game where Alabama, we expect the O-line to be healthy. That's, by the way, why I'm not making an official pick today. I need to hear an update from Kalen DeBoer on those big guys up front. But that does matter, and that is important coming into this game. From the Georgia perspective, I'll tell you this. The most interesting part to me is specifically Carson Beck, obviously outside of how they handle the Alabama run game. But like, what version of Carson Beck are we getting? Because Georgia fans, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I'm not here criticizing your program. I'm not here to say that you're 3-0. You beat what is a very good Clemson team. We're learning that maybe Georgia made Clemson look worse than they actually are. And you did win an SEC road game against a team that has historically given you trouble in Lexington. So I don't want to undersell it. But at the same time, one thing that stood out about that game, Carson Beck, I think he's been fine. I don't know that he's been like number one overall pick type good. And all you got to do is look back on last year versus this year. Last year, 72% completion percentage on the season, 24 touchdowns. Well, this year he's got 7 touchdowns, but 5 of them were against Tennessee Tech. And in the 2 games that were not Tennessee Tech, he's been very good, but I wouldn't say elite. 38 of 57 passing, that's about 66%. So again, when you remember that he completed 72% of his passes last year, that's a little bit of a regression early. It's 3 games. None of the big ones have been at home. 1 neutral, one at Kentucky. So I don't, again, want to pretend like it's everything, but I can't sit here and pretend like it's nothing either, especially coming off of a 15 of 24 performance for 160 yards against the Wildcats, okay? Same time, I think it's worth noting, still don't know much about Alabama's secondary, right? And that's the fun part, but also tough part about handicapping games early in the season, is that Alabama's pass defense, they've looked very good. Top 10 in the country statistically as of right now. But they've also played Western Kentucky. They played a South Florida team that we know would much rather run the football, even with their quarterback. Byron Brown is a run-first quarterback. They want to run the football more than pass it with their quarterback. And then on top of that, you played Wisconsin, who not only was not passing the ball well coming into that game, their starting quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, gets hurt in that game. And so is Alabama's secondary that much improved? This is what Nick Saban called the weakness of this team coming into this year. Yes, Nick Saban, the now ESPN analyst. Is it improved? Or have you just not faced an NFL caliber quarterback yet like you will with Carson Beck? Again, that's kind of the fun part of this time of year, is trying to figure out, okay, what have we actually learned so far and what has to do with competition, who you've played, et cetera. Just go back to this past Saturday, right? We thought Michigan was terrible. Well, it turns out Michigan just might have played the best team in the country in Texas. No offense to any Alabama fans, Georgia fans that are listening, but Texas is really good. USC we thought was awesome. Well, maybe USC just played an LSU team that isn't very good. So I bring it up because we're going to try to figure out all that stuff throughout the week. But to me, if you're asking me here on a Monday, hey, Torres, what are the 2 big X factors in this game that are going to decide everything? I think it's, can Alabama run the ball effectively against that Georgia front that even Kirby Smart acknowledges isn't as deep as they have been in the past? But then the counter to that, can Carson Beck make plays with his arm? Because if he can, it could be a long day for that Alabama secondary. Listen, I'll just say this. This is the first of many breakdowns, many analysis and over-analysis segments of this game. I am so excited. I hope you guys are too. Cannot wait. We will have plenty all week on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. As you can see, if you're not subscribed, now feels like a heck of a time to start. Appreciate everybody's support. We'll be back with more on this game throughout the week. Thanks again for tuning in.